My father hired a security team to throw me out of my own home after my grandfather's funeral. I didn't understand his cruel rush to evict me until I discovered the shocking reason buried deep within the will's fine print. Hello, my name is Adeline, and what you are about to hear is a family story that redefines the very meaning of the word. It's a story about betrayal, about greed, and about the quiet, unyielding power of a final lesson from beyond the grave. You see, I always believed family was defined by blood, by shared history and unconditional love. But in my family, it was a currency, a means to an end. It was a cold truth I had to learn the hard way, at the most painful moment of my life. It was at my grandfather Arthur's funeral, a somber, gray day in historic Charleston. My grandfather, a man who built an empire from nothing, who was my rock and my world, was gone. As the will was read, my father, Marcus, looked me straight in the eyes after hearing he'd inherited everything and said, "You are useless to me now." He thought his victory was complete. He thought the game was over. What he didn't know about the will would change everything in just 24 hours. The look on his face when he said those words, the absolute cruelty and relief it's an image burned into my mind forever. My world, as I knew it, shattered in that moment. If you have ever felt like the forgotten one in your family, just type the city you're watching from in the comments. Let's see how far this silent strength reaches. To understand the weight of that moment, you have to understand the family I grew up in. My mother, bless her heart, passed away when I was just a little girl. She was my light, and when she was gone, a part of my father, Marcus, seemed to go with her. He became distant, cold, and entirely consumed by his career. While he was chasing business deals in high-rises in the financial district of New York City, my grandfather, Arthur, stepped in. He became the father I never had. He taught me about integrity, hard work, and that true wealth is measured in moments, not dollars. His home in Charleston, a beautiful old estate with creaking floors and sprawling gardens, wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary. It was filled with books and art, and most importantly, it was filled with his love. He was a self-made man, a titan in the construction business, but you would never know it from his humble demeanor. My father, on the other hand, was the opposite. He grew up expecting the family fortune and was always impatient to get his hands on it. The tension was a constant shadow in our lives, a silent war of values between a man who valued people and a man who valued money. If this story hit you hard, don't forget to hit that like button. It tells the algorithm these stories matter, and it tells me to keep going. My father, Marcus, was a ghost in my childhood. I'd try so hard to connect with him, sending him drawings, writing him long letters, but they all seemed to disappear into the void of his busy schedule. He'd show up for a few minutes at a school play, his eyes constantly on his watch, and leave with a quick, clinical excuse. My grandfather, Arthur, was always there, a steady presence in the front row, his face beaming with pride. He never missed a single ballet recital or school event. I eventually stopped looking for my father in the crowd and learned to cherish my grandfather's consistent love instead. It was Arthur who taught me the most valuable lessons. He would say, "A mind needs to be exercised just like a muscle," and he would challenge my thinking with profound questions during our Sunday morning waffle tradition. It was a beautiful, peaceful life, but underneath it all, a constant tension simmered. My father's visits to our Charleston home were never about family, they were about business. His eyes would constantly drift to the expensive artwork and antiques, mentally cataloging their value. He had no genuine interest in my life or my dreams, only in what he stood to inherit. The signs of my father's greed weren't just subtle, they were overt. I remember a particularly chilling moment when I was in my early 20s. My grandfather, Arthur, had been having some minor health issues, nothing serious yet. My father, Marcus, saw it as an opportunity. He came to the house and tried to convince Arthur to sign over power of attorney, claiming it was a smart business move to secure the assets in case of a sudden decline. He even brought a lawyer with him. But Arthur, being the wise man he was, had a plan. He calmly agreed, but insisted on a test first, a simple memory game with dates and numbers related to the company's early days. My father, who had always relied on his assistants to handle details, stumbled and failed. It was clear he had no real knowledge or passion for the business Arthur had built. It was a quiet, non-confrontational victory for my grandfather, but it showed me just how far my father was willing to go to get what he wanted. He lacked the heart and the genuine understanding of the business that my grandfather had spent a lifetime cultivating. Let me know. Were you ever the one who saw through a family member's games? Type watcher if you saw it all unfold. Or fighter if you had to confront it head-on. I want to see the balance. As my grandfather's health truly began to decline, my father's visits, once rare, became almost a weekly occurrence. To any outsider, it would have seemed like a son finally reconnecting with his aging father. But I knew better. His questions always circled back to the will, the estate, the company. The closer Arthur came to the end, the more attentive Marcus became to the potential beginning of his inheritance. My grandfather saw it too. He once took my hand and said, "People show you who they are, Adeline. It's not your job to make excuses for them." His mind was as sharp as ever, and our conversations deepened, filled with wisdom and cherished memories. He told me about his regrets with my father, wondering if he had pushed him too hard or not hard enough. I moved back into our Charleston home, setting aside my own life and remote marketing career to care for him. It was a no-brainer. He had been my rock my entire life. Now it was my turn to be his. The money became tighter, but that was the least of my concerns. What mattered was the time we had left, sharing stories from his favorite books and tending to the rose garden he had cultivated for decades. We spent those months talking about everything and nothing, from his days laying the first foundations of his company to his philosophy on life. He would read to me from his favorite books and share memories triggered by the passages. "Life is a collection of stories," he told me once. "Make sure yours is worth telling." On good days, he'd sit in his wheelchair in the garden, teaching me about pruning techniques. "Everything worthwhile takes time, Adeline," he'd say. "Remember that with people, too. The best ones reveal their beauty slowly." During this period, my father, Marcus, began visiting twice a week, sometimes bringing expensive takeout that Arthur, with his diminished appetite, could barely touch. His conversations would always casually drift to the company's new contracts and profit margins, a transparent effort to impress my grandfather. After one of these visits, Arthur asked me to help him into his study. Once the door closed, he said, "I need you to call my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. It's time to review some paperwork." It was a quiet moment, but it felt incredibly significant. I had no idea then what was being set in motion, a plan so ingenious it could only have been crafted by the wise man I was so privileged to call my grandfather. The day of the will reading felt like a storm was brewing. The air in the study of our Charleston home was thick with tension. My father, Marcus, sat behind my grandfather's desk, a symbolic, arrogant move that made my stomach turn. He was already claiming his territory. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, read the initial provisions: bequests to loyal staff, small donations. My father fidgeted impatiently. Then, the main inheritance clause was read. "To my son, Marcus Arthur Stewart, I leave Stewart Construction and all its holdings, valued at approximately $56 million, along with the family home and its contents." My father's face transformed, his triumphant smirk a chilling display of his true nature. He thought he had it all. He stood up, already carrying himself differently, a new multimillionaire. He looked at me and said, "You heard it all, Adeline. The company and the estate come to me. I'll give you until tomorrow to remove your belongings." My heart shattered. The man who was supposed to be my protector had just discarded me. He said, "You were only useful while my father needed looking after. You are useless now." If you have ever felt that punch to the gut when someone you trusted reveals their true colors, type exposed in the comments. This is a moment many of us know all too well. In the wake of my father's cruel words, a profound silence fell. He stood there, on a phone call, his feet propped up on my grandfather's antique desk, a blatant show of casual disregard for everything it represented. He was arranging renovations to make it his own. I stood there, watching him, a knot of grief and disbelief tightening in my chest. He was so consumed by his victory, he didn't even see me. What he didn't know was that while he was celebrating, the true victory was already slipping away. He had a few long-time employees on the phone, trying to assert his new authority. I watched his face tighten as their responses were less than enthusiastic. He tried to give a series of orders, but their quiet resistance was palpable, a passive-aggressive mutiny. They were subtle in their contempt, saying things like, "We'll have to check with the original paperwork, sir," or, "That's not how Mr. Arthur did things." They knew him, just as I did. They knew he lacked the vision and character of my grandfather. It was a small but significant moment. He had gained a company, but he had lost the respect of the people who ran it. His victory was hollow, built on a foundation of sand. That night, I didn't sleep. I spent hours in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by memories, trying to make sense of the past 24 hours. The man who should have been my father had just thrown me out of the only home I'd ever known. Each item I packed into a suitcase held a memory of my grandfather's love, the music box from my 16th birthday, the seashells we'd collected on trips to Cape Cod. By morning, my eyes were swollen, my heart felt like a hollow shell. Just as I was about to leave, 2 security guards appeared, hired by my father to oversee the property transition. The locksmith was already changing the locks. It was the final, brutal act of betrayal. I drove away from the house, a blur of tears and disbelief, with my entire life packed into 2 small suitcases. My savings were running low. I felt utterly lost and alone. And then, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was formal. "Jolene Stewart? This is Patricia from Harold Henderson's law office. Mr. Henderson would like to meet with you this afternoon. It concerns your grandfather's estate and is of urgent importance." My heart skipped a beat. Why would Harold, my grandfather's attorney, want to see me? If you've ever had a glimmer of hope in your darkest hour, let me know in the comments. We can share our moments of unexpected grace. I arrived at Harold Henderson's law office, a beautiful old building in Boston, Massachusetts. Its dark wood paneling and leather-bound books exuded an old-world elegance. Harold greeted me warmly, his demeanor completely different from the professional detachment he had maintained at the will reading. He looked at me, a soft smile on his face, and said, "Did your father even read the complete will, Adeline?" I stared at him, confused. "He inherited everything," I said, my voice shaky. "The company, the house, the $56 million. Harold chuckled softly. "Ah, there's the Marcus I've known for 30 years, always too impatient for details." He opened a leather portfolio and removed a thick document. "Your grandfather anticipated this exact behavior." My heart was pounding. He explained that while the main provisions were read aloud, the full document contained specific conditions. He cleared his throat and began to read. "The bequest to my son, Marcus Arthur Stewart, is contingent upon his agreement to provide lifetime support for my granddaughter Adeline Sarah Stewart, including, but not limited to, housing at the family residence." As Harold read, the room seemed to spin. But he violated that this morning. "He threw me out," I stammered. Harold's eyes twinkled. "Precisely. And in doing so, less than 24 hours after the will reading, he has defaulted on the primary condition of his inheritance." Harold's words hung in the air. "You are now the sole owner of Stewart Construction and all its assets, valued at approximately $56 million. I was speechless. This couldn't be right. My grandfather hadn't forgotten me. He had created an ingenious plan. He had given my father one final chance to do the right thing, to be the man he should have been, but he had also prepared for the exact opposite. Harold then revealed that my grandfather had left video messages for both of us. He was very specific. They had to be viewed together. The next morning, Marcus stormed into the conference room, accompanied by his lawyer, a man in an expensive suit. But my grandfather's words on the screen cut through all of his arrogance. "Marcus," he said, his voice firm, "if you are watching this, then you have done exactly what I predicted." He went on to say that his legacy was not meant to be a monument to greed. He told my father he had valued money above relationships, and that now he would have neither. The video ended, and a heavy silence filled the room. Then, Harold played the second video. My grandfather's expression was gentle as he began. "My dearest Adeline, you have shown me what true family means through your actions, not just your words. The company is now yours." The video ended, and my father's face was a mask of shock and defeat. He tried to argue, to threaten legal action, but it was useless. As Harold explained, my grandfather had created an ironclad document. There was a no contest clause, and my father's actions had already triggered the transfer of all assets to me. I simply said, "Grandfather left you a path back, Dad, not to control everything, but to be a part of the legacy he built. That opportunity is real, but only if your change is real, too." My father's attorney looked defeated. We all knew this was over. As I left the law office, the world looked different. The same streets I had walked in despair just hours before now seemed full of possibility. I had learned that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or property, but the wisdom to know your own worth. The family revenge story had a happy ending, not because I got everything, but because my father's actions revealed a profound truth. For all of you who have faced betrayal, remember this. True victory is not in getting even, but in rising above it with grace and integrity. It's about building something of your own, honoring the good in your life, and leaving a legacy of love, not just wealth. If this story speaks to your truth, subscribe and join our community. Your support tells the world that these stories matter.